Dr. Ott. Okay. Hi, everybody. So, last session for the day, and after that we have two important events. We have the last keynote of the day, and then finally we have the roundtable. So the program session now, keynote, Professor Lessard from Canada, and Julien Schechter will animate a roundtable at the end. Just a last comment, again, logistics. Before leaving for the boat, I prefer to have all people who will participate here, because I have to fill a list who has AG, who has half price, etc. So we have to check to fill a paper. It's logistics. So please, all people who will go with us to the social event, try to be here at 5 when we finish, or 5:30, so that we can make the checking. Okay, so the program is clear? Nice. So now I'm pleased to give the mic to Professor Ott. Mr. Ott. Dr. Ott. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. So thank you for being present this afternoon in this healthcare session. So we are going to discuss healthcare-related topics, mostly exergames in the first presentation made by Fabio Solari. And then we'll have a second presentation, and that will be a really short session this afternoon because we have only 2 publications. So please welcome Fabio Solari, who's going to present his paper. Thanks a lot.
Good. Perfect. Non, c'est juste qu'on ne trouvait pas la présentation. Good.
Non, ça s'affiche pas. Non, parce que là, c'est pas le bon.
Ah, on n'est pas...
Non, vous n'êtes pas dans le bon... Vous n'avez pas cliqué au bon endroit. Normalement, c'est celui-là.
Oui.
No, perfect. Thanks.
Good.
That's great.
It's good.
Works.
Nice.
Okay. Thank you for an introduction. This talk is about a web-based framework for the management of a multi-platform exergame. The aim of this work was to simplify the interaction between the doctor and the patients. The doctor allows them to access the data of the exergame in an automatic way, and for the patient to be simple to download and use the exergame, since they are adapted to the different platform. The reason is to reduce the global cost for the institution, since they do not have to provide the devices, and for the patient they can do the exergame by using own device. Essentially, this is not a new idea. There is already works about this topic, some study about medical platform, exergame in healthcare, and also someone did work similar to our to provide a web platform for exergame. And there are also commercial solutions. We know this is the state of the art. But I try to contextualize my work. This is done inside the project, Interreg Alcotra project between Italy and France. These are projects where the public clinical service are the center, and then there was a clear statement to develop a custom framework inside this project, not to use what was already available. And another point is to do the data local inside each hospital that is in the project, in order to allow to share this solution between the Italy and France. Otherwise, it's not possible. We cannot use a cloud to do this. This is the classical schema about a web platform to provide exergame. We have from a side the doctors then can access the data of the patients through the web platform, and the patients can download their specific exergame that is discussed with the doctors, and this exergame is adapted to different platforms, for desktop, for tablet, to do it in virtual reality or on the web. And then there is a database, of course, that allows to collect the data. The novelty for these works is to provide, at the end of the project, the web platform freely available for the community, and then also to try to develop the exergame in a way that is possible to use on multiple different platforms, trying to change the user interface according to the device. This is a standard platform where there are an initial web page where there is some information about the framework of the project and for the patients. Then there is the part about registration and the login. And then there is an internal part where patients can download the game for their specific platform. For some reason that is related to the way in Italy is handled the patients and the way to access the public services, this is not possible to use these tools for any people. They must already in charge of the healthy public institution of in Italy, since this is a problem of law. So there is some constraints on this that is related to security of data, but also how in Italy we provide public services to the citizen. We manage the data from the game in order to provide graphics, plots to the doctor in order to provide information about the temporal evolution of the performance of the patients. These are some details in order to allow you to see that is quite a simple implementation, since it must works on the server of the hospital that are in Liguria region, so there are some constraints, and you use the Unity engine to develop the exergame. Specifically, we used exergame from the literature, since our effort is in adapting them to the different devices, changing the user interface, not to develop the game, since this is already done in several versions. And here there is a game that is done for the post-stroke rehabilitation. It is clear that it is easy to do on a tablet or on a PC by using a mouse or a tap, and this is the implementation in virtual reality. So you changed the user interface to allow to do the same game by using different devices. This is not a game that is of literature, was suggested by doctors in order for arm rehabilitation, again for injury or for post-stroke. And then we measure if the patient is able to follow a specific path, and we record the errors. Again, this is simple to see how is possible to implement by using touch screen or mouse. This is the virtual reality implementation. This is instead already developed for virtual reality, and it is a kitchen and cooking serious game to allow Alzheimer patients to perform daily living activities. And this is the implementation in virtual reality. It is quite simple to do. We use a touchful input device, since they use the controller, since it's more stable. And we need to see how to adapt it for the tablet, where you have to use the tap to select the object and the tap to release it. We changed the user interface, and the same for the desktop interface, where you have to use mouse and the keyboard in order to move the object. So this is what we did inside this project. The project are already running, so there is only the pilot study we did to develop the framework together, some patients and the doctor, and we have not tested it by using a large sample of people. What the reason to do this is to enlarge the patient population that can be able to use this game, since there are different versions of this game that can adapt to the device available at home. For instance, some patients told that they used the virtual reality headset of the child in the family to do the exer game, for instance, and then is also a way to allow the different generation in a family to have a common technological point, instead to have a gap related to the age. Is a way to allow children and older people to do some activity together. And the global idea for the project is to decrease the global cost and to improve the patient's well-being. This is only a pilot study. Thank you for your attention.
So, thanks a lot, Mr. Fabio Solari. Is there any questions in the room? Yes.
Do you see any potential problem with people doing the exercise instead of the patient? Because I think about people spoofing the identity of someone else to use the software to make a better score, or, you know, as there's no way to certify that it's the patient that did the exercise.
I see the problem, and this is in the project is managed by the psychologist of the hospital that do some interview with the patients before to to allow them to use these tools in order to have an idea if they are aware of what we will do or not.
Another question? No? I have one. Do you foresee more the patient being onboarded by the doctor in this situation, or is it more likely that the patient will ask for the doctor to use some kind of exert games to improve his therapy?
This is a good question. Indeed, in my experience for this project, the idea comes from the doctor. The idea comes from the doctor. They want to use these new technologies to allow patients to experience a new way to do rehabilitation or assessment, more than from patients.
So basically it means also that the doctor is kind of technology aware, and also maybe do you foresee the doctor providing the equipment, let's say the Oculus or the kind of VR devices to the patient? Or
no, the idea indeed is to provide a different version in order to allow patients to use what they have at home. There is not the public health in Italy that provide this device, not up to now.
Yeah, mostly due to reimbursement, I guess, or this kind of policies. All right. Is there last questions? No? So
okay.
Thanks again, Mr. Solari. And now it's time to welcome Dominique Correia de Oliveira, who's going to present a paper about PRITS, a serious game for law education.
Okay. Thank you and welcome to the presentation of the PRITS serious game. I'm Dominique Correa. Actually, I'm teacher at ESAV Lausanne here in Switzerland, the School of Health Sciences, Vaud. And it's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to congratulate the organization of the symposium. The PRITS project, it's a project about the development of serious game with the goal to support the courses on patients' rights given at ESAV to our students. And in the game, the player assumes the role of caregiver, and his objectives are to meet the needs of the patient while respecting his rights. The development of this project, it's a project multidisciplinary with different disciplines like the health sector inside ESAV, but also we have a legal unit with lawyers, and we work with them to make the definition of the topics for the serious games. Topics like the assisted suicide, like the medical secrecy, and it was about some topics of the law very important in the clinical work in hospitals. But this collaboration was also with the Halbasim research axis of the School of Management and Engineering of Vaud. So what was the problem at the origin of the project? The literature show us that actually health education does not sufficiently prepare our professionals to promote patients' rights in the clinical hospitals. And for us, for the teachers, it was very difficult to motivate, but also to explain to our students where is the places of the law inside the health sector. And that's the reason why we think about the possibility to diversify the pedagogical option. And that's the reason we think about the development of serious game with the characteristics of playing, but also of learning. And with the objective to expand pedagogical options. So my presentation will be divided in 4 parts. The game, but also how does it fit into a pedagogical scenario. The content management, and we are very glad to share with you the first results of the implementation of our project, because it was the first year and we use our serious game with almost 300 students this year. So about the game, we can see the interface, and when we're accessing the simulation, we first see the home page with a set of thumbnails. And like you can see in the home page, we have a different situation with different patients with different problematic. And each card represents the description of the pathology. And the teacher can choose the patient and the pathology between the different school of our students. About the game, like you see in the script, it's a description of the patient and his pathology. And the user, the gamer, who begin the dialogue with the patient will have some different options. And between the options, the dialogue will be different. And between the response and the answer of the user, of the student, the knowledge of the law will be mobilized. So what are the options for the user, for the student? We can have some literature to find the answer to the problem. And the dialogue, when he's over, the user, the student, can return to the home page patients and going in other scenario. How do we think about the integration of the game? For us, it was very important to define one thing. The serious game is integrated in pedagogical scenario. So in our courses, we have different moments. One moment before the utilization of the serious game, and one moment after. And what was very important for us to identify some characteristics. And which characteristics? Cognitive fidelity. For us, the more important, like you see in the script is not the graphism, but the immersion in the real situations. And for us, what we searched in our series game was the capacity to make a cognitive immersion for our students. And the first results are very interesting about this point. So, in the pedagogical scenario, we have one moment with the teacher before the utilization of serious game. And in this moment, we make a briefing about the utilization. So we can share with our students the objective of the serious games, but we have an introduction of a course of law with some topics. During the utilization of the serious games, we invite our students to make some search for information. The logic behind is to have a processes who the students must to find the information. The teacher will not give the information because that's the objective of the serious game. And we have another point very interesting. We can play the serious game alone, but also in groups. And sometimes we have some confrontation of ideas in the different groups. And that's very interesting because one thing very important in the law, sometimes we don't have a good response. We can have a lot of good response. So that's the reason the serious game has a potential. It makes some reflection inside the students' groups. And after the utilization of the serious games, we have a moment with a debriefing with the students, and that's the point where we share some ideas, some experiences, and if there needs a consolidation of knowledge and theoretical input. Another characteristic very important for us in the development of the serious game was the development of a authority system, because in the beginning of the development, we would like to imagine a dispositive very easily to use for the teacher, because like you know, the law is a processus. He can move and he can change. And that's very difficult for us, for the health teachers, to have the capacity to change the scenarios. That's the reason we develop interface very easily to manage, and actually all the health sectors, all the health teachers can move, can change, can create new scenarios without the support of informatic sector. And that's very interesting for us. So what are the results? And for us, it was very important to understand if the implementation of this serious game in our courses have an interest. And the assessment includes both assessment, the game itself, but also the impact of learning on our students. And the first results are very interesting because we see better results this year in our students, but it's true we can't make a direct relation between better results and the implementation of the serious game. But there is something we are very, very convinced. The implementation of the serious game impact in our way we teach our students, because we change the processes of the teaching, and that's maybe one way to have better results in our students, maybe. The other point we assessed was the game itself, and for the assessment for the serious game, we use the questionnaire attractive, who is a questionnaire with two characteristics: the evaluation of the pragmatic quality, like usefulness and usability, and the hedonic quality, like the pleasure, the stimulation, or the identification. And almost 300 students respond to the questionnaire, and the first results are interesting. Like you can see in the portfolio of the results, actually, the first implementation of the serious game are very near from the rather good result for the first use. Like you see, we have some good results in the pragmatic aspect, but we can improve in the hedonic aspect. It was one of the points the students share with us about maybe the design of the interface, not very how can I say that, very user-friendly. And maybe we can improve this aspect. And another point about the results was the good accessibility, because we can use that in course, but also remotely. And for the students, it's very interesting to have a tool to study for the exams. And about the conclusion, actually, we are thinking about new developments, because this project was developed for the students, but actually we have some health professionals interesting to understand if we can develop this kind of tools for the clinical hospitals too, because like you can imagine, the law is everywhere in the hospital, in the health sectors. So maybe it will be the second development of the PRITS project, maybe a project for the health professionals. So thank you, and I hope it will, I can answer to the question. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Correa. So, yeah, I think it's a great example of how serious gaming can improve teaching and learning. Really, really nice. Is there any question to ask? Okay, let's start here.
Merci. I was wondering, looking at the game design of your game, it seems it's a prompt, some text, and then you have choices, which leads to some other text, which is a very classical format, and great because very easy to catch on. I wonder if you had looked at Twine as a tool to do this, because Twine is a very popular tool that essentially does exactly what you're doing. So it's a node-based authoring system that's very accessible. So if you did, why not use it? Or
yeah, actually we think about this possibility to use this kind of tool, but I'm not from the informatics sector, but I can say one thing. For us, I think the interface is important, but we conclude one thing for our students and maybe for the health professionals, the important are the reality of the situations, you know, because for our students, you can have an interface very, very nice, but if the reality of the situation are not very near from the hospital, we don't have the motivation because they are thinking, oh, it's not a real situation. In my future, I will not find this kind of things, suicide assisted, like you show me. It's only in the movies. In the reality, this is not like that. And for us, it's a very, very big problem. It's to develop some situation very near from the reality of the hospital and from the clinicals. And maybe the interface are not our priority, but we can maybe think about another options. It's true.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dominic. We know well each other, I believe, and that's why I will ask you a tricky question. In your serious game, there is a process where students are asked some questions, and
yeah.
depending on the answer, the choice will change and stuff like that. But what is there a threshold, a ranking, a scoring, and is there like you lost or you win stuff?
It was a very interesting discussion with the informatics, because for me, because I work with you, I was introducing in the game design with Stefan, and I learned something about that. And for me, in my representation, the serious game must to be fun, must to have some game characteristics, some challenge. And it's true, in our serious game, the priority was not this point. The only point we have some challenges, it's to, for open another situation, you must to complete the first one. And you can't go up without these results. And that's the maybe only point of gaming mechanics, you know. But it's true, we don't make our priority some the question of gaming. It will be maybe a point to development, because our students, it's true, don't find very fun to complete the serious game, but they find very interesting to improve their knowledge about the law. One question, can we have some fun making law? I don't know. Some lawyers will respond maybe yes, it can be fun to have some question of law, but I think we have a possibility to develop the serious game in this point, maybe. The other point, it's our focus, one more time, was the cognitive fidelity. And that's the reason we don't find a lot of points of maybe the gaming. I don't know.
I jump on Stefan's question. While designing the questions, do you focus more on providing some situations which would bring to the student some kind of the acquisition of soft skills, like being able to answer to some really tricky questions from the patients or their family in some situation? I guess in the hospital, it can be, yeah, sometimes not super pleasant for the practitioner to answer to questions. Or do you focus more on providing questions which would give a true knowledge of the law, like really the objective knowledge.
One thing I can say, the teaching of the law in our sector, in the health sector, is very difficult because for our students, this is not their priority. For us, the priority is to learn something about the clinical question. But our priority in our serious game was to invite our students to open their mind about one situation. In this situation, what kind of reflection we can have between this difficulty, like the medical secrecy. In this situation, if we have medical secrecy, what can I do? Can I share my information with which professionals? And that's the logic of the serious game, is not to give the new knowledge, but maybe more to invite the students to open the reflection and to invite the student to find the good information. Because the health professionals are not expert in the law. And that's not the goal of the serious game. The goal of the serious game is to invite, to open the reflection and to find the good information in the good places. And that's the reason with the serious game, you have some links to find some literature specific of the law in the health sector. And that's the logic of our serious game.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we're running a bit out of time.
Thank you.
But I think we'll have time for questions later. Mr. Correa.
And thank you, Otto, for managing this session, your certification also. Thank you a lot. Okay, so now I'm very pleased to invite Jonathan Lessard for the third keynote of the day. Jonathan comes from Concordia University, Montreal, Canada, and he will present us the use of natural language interaction for gamification and serious gaming. So welcome again.
Merci, thank you. Bonjour, thank you organizers to have invited me. That's great, thanks for being here. I know it's late and it's very warm, so I'll try to make this as fun and quick as possible. So I'm an associate professor in game design at Concordia University, and I'm not situated in serious games per se, although I imagine that any discoveries in game design in general can be immediately of use for serious game designers after that. So the thing I'm going to propose to you is to talk to you a little bit about my work on natural language interaction. So, and I think the last speaker, I think, offers me actually a good step to talk of that. So I have my research group called the Lab, because it was focused mostly on conversation, now diverging to emergent storytelling and social simulation. The methodology is based on research creation, so the idea is to make a hypothesis and then try it in a game, see what works, and then learn from it, and then usually it leads to some other question that leads to another game and a bunch of academic papers as well. The talk is split in two things. You can use natural language to let players talk to your game, but you can also use natural language to talk differently to the players. So that will be the split. So for context, in many games, you have many opportunities for customization. For example, in this case, I can really choose between 10 different mustaches for my character, and so I have some agency on the characterization. And then, these are typical role-playing games, for example, and then I have many choices on the abilities that my character will have, and so I'm really customizing and making it my own. However, when it comes to conversation, it looks like this often. So you meet someone, you're in your own character, and then you have to choose between 3 items. And that's okay. I mean, that's all games work like this, so it's not a problem. It leaves a lot of power to designers to control the flow of the narrative. But for players, there's what's the downside is that you don't have so much agency to come up with your own answer. So you have an idea of what your character should be saying or what you want your character to be saying at this point, but you have three choices. When you imagine the spectrum of human conversation, then that's a very, very small choice. So this is why I was thinking of the last presentation. I think the solution is perfectly suitable, but it could be interesting also to offer space for players to come up with their own answers. When we talk to someone in reality, if someone says something to us, we have to imagine an answer. We can't just select. And when we select, we have the answers in front of us, so the cognitive charge is definitely not the same. And we have a precedent for this. It's not essentially, it's not even new technology. Many people might know here from even 1965, ELIZA was one of the first chatbot that was a very clever piece of, and simple piece of software that essentially turned human input into questions, and it felt like a psychologist. And it was surprisingly engaging. I mean, the researcher was surprised by how this simple thing could really feel like a conversation. This is an actual excerpt from the time. And definitely speaking with bots or characters, virtual characters is getting more common and more sophisticated. And so people are more used to it. It's a possibility. And I'm always surprised. When I started working on this, I expected this to boom into games, like this is gonna happen. I'm always surprised that it's actually very not prevalent. And so there's opportunity there. So my question is, how can a conversation be a game? If I'm gonna make a game out of a conversation, and how do we do that? So I came up with a first prototype with a very simple context. So I chose the Snow White folktale because most people are at least aware of it, so it needs very little explanation. And you get into the game in a very specific point of the folktale where you're the evil stepmother disguised as an old woman who comes to Snow White's door and offers an apple, which is poison, and she wants Snow White to eat the apple to kill her. And her motivation is that she wants to be the most beautiful woman in the world. So you know that, you just go there, you're the old woman, or the stepmother disguised as an old woman. And what I like with this situation is I never understood why would Snow White eat that apple. She knows someone's out to kill her, and a stranger comes to her door and offers her food. It seems like there are some red flags there. But here I'm prompting the player, okay, how would you convince Snow White? Just do it. What words will you use? So it opens the play space for the player. But how do you design this, game designer? So it's a puzzle. What kind of a puzzle is it? What are the pieces of the puzzle? So here, you have an objective. You have to reach a state of affairs through dialogue. Someone doesn't want to do what you want them to do, and you have to convince them. And then the dialogue moves are made via free text input instead of choices, but that can also work for a choice-based game, by the way. And then you have feedback, which is what the character says to you. It gives you a sense of whether you're moving forward or not. And then how do you design that? So I can skip quickly over this, but I get inspired from this researcher who has a model of what's an argumentation. Because an argumentation is a very special mode of conversation for which there's no script. Every time you want to convince someone of something, it's a new situation, or else it would be solved already. So you have to come up with arguments. And typically, it's a matter of a conflict in beliefs and desires from the two parties, and you need to ideally resolve it by balancing these. Anyways, just a note. So what I do is I make this game. You have to convince Snow White. I put it on the net in game portals. Anybody can play it. And I get quite a lot of playthroughs, which shows me a little bit of how people are engaging with this. And yeah, I can look at the logs of how people interact. And then it shows how people interact. For example, in black, you have Snow White. Excuse me, but I don't understand who you are and what you're doing here. And so the player says, I just wanted to see if you wanted this fresh, juicy apple. So here, this is a good conversational move. The apple is very good, so maybe you create a desire for it. So you get a bit more of trust. It does look fresh, And juicy too. I've heard your stepmother is around here and wanted to warn you. So this is a clever player who wants to create complicity by saying, I know about the stepmother thing, so I'm not the stepmother, obviously, which is a double bluff in a sense. So thanks, but I know my stepmother's plans to assassinate me, but Snow White still picks up a little bit of trust through the process. Trying to kill you, such a sweet girl, what a hag. You are so understanding. So here, trust building as well by being complicit. I would like to punch your stepmother in the head. So that's a pretty direct approach, but still Snow White likes that. It's like, yeah, that feels like you're my friend. So you would really do that? Thank you. So what I noticed through all these logs is that at first I was a bit wary that I'm asking a lot of the players to type in all these texts instead of just selecting them. But what I noticed is that players actually really liked that space, and many of them engaged and were very creative, playing in character and being very creative in the approaches. And so I thought, okay, that leads me to the next prototype. I'm like, okay, I can use player creativity, whereas in typical dialogue systems, I can't because I'm only providing content and they select content. Here I can get content. So my next question is, how can I foster player creativity? So that's a weird one. So same interface, but different situation. You're in the antiquity, and so the player is told that they've met some kind of divinity, and they have to convert that guy to their new divinity. So the guy here has almost no content. All he does is ask questions, like, what's the name of that god? What do I have to do? What will I get from it? Blah, blah, blah. And the player just invents everything. And then what you can do with natural language is also pick up some of the propositions from the player and then throw them back in another context, and that creates a great moment of complicity between the player and the character. So it sets up like a comedy duo where the character is like the straight man of the comedy duo who just sets up the context for the player making the punchline. And you see that a lot in the logs. For example, will Star Trek want some building for its worship? So in this case, Star Trek is obviously a concept provided by the player, so their god is called Star Trek. And the player answers, yeah, maybe a pop-up bar in a gift shop. Well, I find that pretty funny. So, and then the bot says, of course, yeah, of course. But what will this pop-up look like? Here's this little error, the pop-up should be pop-up bar. Everyone will wear a costume and buy overpriced drinks. It will be the best experience of their lives. More original than the usual pyramid, so here the punchline lands. And you get a little moment where player and bot kind of make some fun together. And it was so funny that I opened a Twitter account where I posted some of the good punchlines that happened through the interaction. So for example, how does Silver String relate to the other gods then? It probably met them at a conference once. Will the university become a sacred place? No, the university is becoming a temple of neoliberalism. And then the bot says, oh, that's too bad. And the player says, yeah, sorry. What will post-structuralism do to those who refuse to adore it? It will find them in their Tumblr feeds and confuse them terribly. Anyways, I find this funny. But here the players are doing this all on their own, like they have no public. They're just having fun alone with the bot. So it shows how strong this conversation can be. So this led me to another intuition that I had, is that in games, many of times NPCs, the players, the characters are used as information signposts. The player needs to know stuff about the game and the world, and so characters are there to just deliver. And typically that's a non-problem. You just ask questions and you get the answer. So I'm thinking, oh, with my new thing, I can maybe make this more complicated and possibly more fun or interesting. So how can I gamify information retrieval by making it more complicated than clear? So that's how game design works. You make things that work perfectly fine. You take things that work perfectly fine and make them uselessly complicated for fun. So this game is also quite strange, but the situation is knowledgeable again. I don't want to over-explain the world. I want things to go fast. So this is the end of Hamlet, and everybody's dead already. Many people die in that play, and they're all back there in their tombs. And you're the person who needs to find out who killed who and for what and why. You need to write the report. And so the only person you can talk to is the gravedigger, and he knows all the answers, but he's stupid. And so you have to ask questions to really dig like the information out of him. I'll give you an example. So for example, how did Ophelia die? You need to know that for your report. He says, she stopped breathing. That was a very bad idea. So that's person being way too literal with the question. Why did she stop breathing? How am I supposed to know why people do things? I wasn't there when it happened. Okay, so where did she die? Well, I imagine it was in the cold water she was immersed in. What water? Well, sure, she was immersed in the river. Can't be immersed in a cup of water. So here you go, you have the information, she drowned in the river, you can move forward with some of the other characters. So these are my 3 prototypes with this system. One thing that I want to mention very quickly is that it's much easier than it might look like. This is really not rocket science. Some of my assistants on this were not programmers at all, but I could train them in the chat script language within a day or 2, and they would get together. There's a lot of convenience. For example, if I want to know if someone's talking to me about food, I don't need to list out all the possible things they might say, steak, apple, whatever. But I can use ontologies, which are banks of synonyms. So, okay, he's talking about food. And I can even capture what they were talking about. If someone says, do you like steak? I don't know that they said steak, but I know they said food. And then I can say, oh, you really like steak? And the bot doesn't actually know, he just says back. So anyways, just so that it's not so hard. And so some conclusions. The good is that it broadens the play space for interactive conversations. It allows for role-playing, really at a conversational level. It allows players to contribute new content to the fiction, which is almost unheard of in games. And it allows nonlinear conversation. So that might not seem obvious, but with choice-based things, the problem is since if you missed the opportunity to say something, you might never go back to that moment where you have that choice. And that's very irritating. If you play games, you know that feeling. Whereas in a natural conversation, I can always go back normally and say, you remember that moment you mentioned chocolate? Yes, I would like some now, even though we were talking about something else. But in many games, you can't do that. The chocolate is past now. But there's a lot of bad as well, so that might be a reason why you don't see all those games all that much. For example, here's a log where everything goes wrong. Have your stepmother ever tried to kill a dwarf? I don't have any stepmothers. So that's a big problem, because that totally kills the drama, the plot here, where the plot is there's a stepmother, she wants to kill Snow White. But here, this is an automated answer, and that just says back and says, I don't have. Pardon me, so this is the player saying, please tell me what's happening. I hate to be rude, but there's an awful lot to do in this house. Okay, so who's trying to kill you? My stepmother wants to kill me so that she can claim to be the most beautiful living woman. But you just told me that you don't have a stepmother. How do I know that? So Snow White is terribly confused here. Did you take your medications today, my child? Then she says, I guess that makes sense. So here the conversation is kind of repaired because Snow White admits that she has lapses of conversation, of confusion. So part of the design, the knowledge that we can get from that is, well, there will always be some flakiness, there will always be some errors, even when you talk to Siri or some very high-grade bot, many times they won't understand what you want to say. So we need to design for that. We won't avoid it. One inspiration that I get is from Janet Murray here, classic. And she says it's important that you script the interactor. So you script your bot, but you must also explain to the person interacting what's their role. And the order, and it's not scripting in the sense that you have to do this, it's a seduction. This is how you can play along with me so that we can both have fun. And there are ways to do this. A clear and constrained domain, this is about Snow White. So if you talk to me about the last hockey game, don't expect me to have an answer. I won't. It's a clear and constrained role. This is what you want to do. A clear objective and clear progress feedback. And when you do this well, you hardly need your bot to work at all. So here, I found a log once that I looked at it because it was surprisingly long. It was like 50 pages long. And in that game, at some point, the player can just exhaust all the possible answers, and they just get a generic answer that says, I have to go now, or something like that. And the player continued playing for 20 pages just because they were in the flow of talking to this person, even though like, there was no actual answers, but they wanted to continue. So if you script the interactor, that helps. You can also justify the errors by putting the character that it makes sense that this character might make errors. So the typical approach, there aren't many natural language playing games, but there are a handful maybe. The most prominent one is Event Zero over there. And most of these games, the chat is you're talking with an AI or a bot, so it's already understood that it's an artificial intelligence, and this will explain all the errors. In my approach, I've done a different approach, is you talk to idiots, and that's both funny, and also it explains why they don't understand everything. So anyways, you have other ways to deal with errors, but the idea is to know that you will have errors and try to use them to keep the conversation rolling rather than it being a showstopper. And what I've noticed is that many game designers are worried about players getting out of immersion, the famous word, because, for example, they get a mistake, an error. But like what we saw with the other log with Snow White, is players can get out, but they'll get in back, and that's it. If your game is seductive enough, they'll play with the bot, they'll try to break it, they'll insult it, they do that a lot. But then at some point they're like, yeah, okay, I know this is a bot, but I still want to win the game. So they go back and then they play in character. So this is fine, it's totally fine. So just a few things about NLP for output, which might be maybe less applied for you, but one thing that I noticed with that last prototype is that this character, the Undertaker, is an interface. Conceptually, that guy is the interface to the world. There's nothing else in the game that communicates the world except talking to that guy. So that inspired me, and I conceptualized this as a subjective interface. You understand the world through the point of view of someone, of a character. And that opens many interesting possibilities for complicating things for the player. So I wanted to play with this, and I'm imagining a gameplay of subjective interfaces. For example, making sense of reality from contradicting sources, which we all do. Understanding your interlocutor's positionality. So if this person is this kind of guy, what he's going to tell me is different from what that other person is going to say. Understanding and dealing with distributed agency. What I mean by that is, if I ask someone to do something for me, there might be an error, or I might have surprises in the actual implementation of that action. Relying on others, in other words, politics. So my idea, the small pitch for that game was, imagine a city simulation. Like in SimCity, you have advisors. They're kind of a side note to the game, and they mostly act as a tutorial for new players. But imagine if you only had that. There are only the advisors. And everything you know from what's happening in the city comes through these people, and everything you can do on the city goes through these people. So here they act as objectively a subjective interface between you and the city. So going back to NLP, natural language a little bit, is immediately it raised a problem, which is how do I get the characters to express their subjective interface on a game world that is varying, because it's not a script. If I have a city, the player might make these decisions or these decisions. These things can happen, so you have a dynamic world, and I can't write all the answers for all the possible states of that world. So that was a puzzle for me. How am I going to do that? So I discovered from speaking to people in conferences, which is useful, about context-free grammars. And I won't go back too much into details, but the idea is that you can write out lines that some portions of the lines are not decided yet. They'll be decided later and being replaced by other possible lines. So that's interesting because it can be generative. You can make many variations, but you can also control the flow. So here I was using James Ryan's expressionist, where it's not only a context-free grammar, but the flow can be controlled by saying, it will go to that node only if this variable is true. So the characters can not only say varying things, but they will also say true things, which in the context of the system, which is important. So anyways, the game I made there is a remake of the first city simulation that was documented, is Hammurabi 1968. And what I liked about that is that it's a very simple city simulation. You're Hammurabi, the king of Babylon, and the antique city, and there are 3 resources: grain, land, and, well, I forget now. But anyways, imagine a city, it's just 3 resources, so it made a very simple case. And so we made this game where you have 3 advisors, and you have an agriculture department or ministry, a territory ministry, and a welfare ministry, and then you have to allocate your ministers to one of these ministries, and then give them a budget. As a player, that's all you do. But the problem is these guys, they misrepresent what's happening because they want to be king instead of you. So they keep lying to you and so to get favor, and you have to deal with bad information. It's very difficult, and you get overthrown all the time. But it makes the city, it twists the city building game in an interesting way. Okay, so just concluding with my current work, just to point at it, I've kind of upped the scale, now that I know how to do this, is I'm generating and describing a whole world and its history. So the quick pitch is imagine The Sims, but for a full society. I don't have 3D representation, so this is where text generation is useful. I describe what's happening in that society through generated text. So this is, my goal with this is to emphasize the discovery of emergent stories. So that's my interest there. Anyways, but in the meantime, to do this, I use the technique of text generation, but I made now that I wanted to do a lot of it, we made our own plugin that would be generative, adaptive, and accessible. And a little bit like my previous interlocutor, to me it's really important that the authoring tools are simple, because that's key to getting good content quickly. And if you have to rely on programmers to put in content, especially narrative content, you're in trouble. So you want people to, with our system, Blabber, I can train someone in literally 30 minutes, and they're up and going. So it's just a text file. For example, in this case, is there a pointer on this? Yeah. So for example, this would be an input line, an output line. Hey, this is just to, this is just to say that, and I can expose a variable here. I don't even know who right now who that person will be, but at runtime, I will know that. So character.name landed in Montreal, and he or she is health status. And I don't know that yet. It's not resolved, so I go to health status. If the character health is larger than 50, and then it goes here, which goes here, and then I can say it will vary between he's doing well, he's doing all right, he is in one piece, so you can vary and create variation. It's completely recursive, so I can have other non-terminals which are expanded, 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 expanded. But that's all there is to it, and you can do tons of stuff with that. Almost done. For example, my author here, he's not a programmer, but he picked up on this and has a lot of fun. And this is his grammar that generates animals in our world with way too many details. For example, so the spoogle is a green-plumed elephantine of mischievous tendency, well known for their bone product. But also, in another generation, the spoogle is an average-sized bizarre critter of exuberant disposition. And these are really easy to do. It's actually it's very fun just to make these grammars. The spoogle is a red, long-necked quadruped, used mainly as draft animal. Their main means of sustenance is fruit. Anyways, so we have fun with that. So the game right now looks like this. It's a full world with people in it. Every single person is simulated. Their whole life history is simulated. And the fun part, or what I want to be fun, is that it auto-generates a Wikipedia of the world that you can totally explore, and all the text is generated depending on the simulation information. So like this is Rosie Thinkhole. She was last seen at Par Right. If I click on Par Right, I get the page of this place, who lives there, what it looks like, what's the vegetation going there. And it's a lot of information, I have to say. And then I can go to every year of her life and see what she did. So she went to a feast, and then she had a baby, and then she met someone, and all these people I can click on and get all the information from there. And right now it doesn't look like it, but you can discover some pretty funny stories in there. Okay, so going back to gamification, once again, I'm not an expert. What I do is lay that here in case it can be interesting. But through these projects, it often happened that the people I talked to had ideas. So I'm reporting some of them. So there's the idea of making information retrieval playful. So if you want people to look for information, but it's just a database, and why would people care about that information? A rule of game design is, if it's hard to get, it's interesting. And that's simple. So even if your information might be not so exciting per se, if the way to get there is complicated, it might become fun. Second, language education, especially the chatbots, they can recognize, for example, errors and still understand and propose corrections. And also it's a non-anxious way of talking, because the person doesn't judge whether you're talking well or not. It just gives you answers, understands or not. Political simulations, training for social encounters, so that's a little bit the same, but any social anxiety can be alleviated by talking to chatbots as a training. Understanding the perspective of others. And there's also a question of open-ended, if, of course, you secure your data and get the consent. Data collection and citizen science, because it's not only, if you want crowdsourcing information, here you can actually get prompts from players or from users. So it doesn't have to be, do you prefer A, B, or C? It's just, what do you prefer? And then you get maybe answers that you were not expecting and looking for. So that can be useful. Or even for data labeling for deep learning and stuff like that. Voila, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for this rich and very dynamic presentation. And we still have 5 minutes for questions, not more. So 3 questions, 4 questions. Okay, it's easier for me.
Okay, how complex is an NLP mechanism that you have behind it?
So in this, for the chatbots, I was using ChatScript, which is an open language for designing chats. It's still available and maintained. I find it pretty good. The problem is if you don't want to do English, it's really baked in to understand, for example, misspellings and the ontology. So that's one of the issues I had. So making the chat itself is not very complicated, but it's just text. On top of it, the interface was made in Unity, but that's just a front end. So what it does is it picks up the input, sends it, it's a server actually, sends it to the chat server, gets back a text, and shows it. That's it. That's how simple it can get. And all the sources are online if anybody is curious. I'm not all that proud of the code in there, but it's there.
Many thanks, Jonathan. Really great talk. I was wondering, are you aware about this Chinese chatbot that is from like a couple of years ago, and it seems to be that there is something like 100 or 200 millions Chinese people using it daily, and seems to be then something like 1 or 2% of this population believe that they are more or less in love with the chatbot. It's more or less like the movie. I don't know if you've seen Her, a great movie by the way. But it seems to be that what you see in the movie is already her head.
Yeah. Conversation is so natural to us, and it's easy to project. I mean, the lesson here is that players do all the work, almost. You propose something, and then players will generate and engage, those who want, engage with it and do all the work, even if the bot is not reliable or whatever. In their mind, they'll find an explanation, and they'll justify it. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I think I heard of that one. I don't know how sophisticated it is or not, but it just shows that there's an appetite for that. It's maybe sad news about the loneliness of people, but also maybe it offers some comfort. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that's tricky. I don't know. I don't collect the IP addresses, so to me it's all anonymous. But it would be easy. For example, when we're developing, someone said maybe Snow White could just ask, what's your social insurance number? Just in case some people answer. And that might happen, you know. Anyways, but people are really talk a lot, say many personal things when you read into that stuff. They can be very impolite with the chatbots, that's for sure. Yeah, they feel completely free.
Another question? It's okay. Good.
All right.
Thank you again, Jonathan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Certification.
Merci.
And the small gift from Switzerland.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So I know that you are a little bit tired, but I am very confident about Julian Schechter, who is able to animate at any circumstances, at any context. So Julian Schechter is a journalist, animator, and very interested with technologies, and he's one of the friend of our event, and he will animate a roundtable today about how to pass to the act in the industrial context, because we talk a lot about with industrial. They like what we do. They always say that it's nice, it's beautiful, but then there's nothing. And this is the problem, and we will try to discuss it. So I'm pleased to welcome Julien, who will animate this roundtable.
Thank you very much. I'll have a few guests that will join me, I guess.
So for all the guests, I will give you only one mic. This is to oblige you to have only one people speaking, which is very difficult to have. So you have one mic, and Julien will animate. So you can pass it from one to the other.
Maybe they can get two.
You can use that?
Yeah, I can use that.
Okay, so
That's
two.
cool.
We are very generous today. Donc toi, tu tiens les trois, et Jonathan, one for both of us. Can you shift a little bit to the left, because we are online on CNN. It's okay? Perfect, we can start.
Very nice. So it's my pleasure to be back here in front of you. It was cool to see you on my screen, but I really prefer to see you in person. So it's my pleasure to be back here. For this roundtable closing today, we have a discussion about the interest, or maybe the lack of interest, of industry in serious gaming and gamification. We have seen the serious game scene flourish in so many domains now. We've seen health, education, military, of course, training, but where is the industry? And more important, what can we do to bring the industry to us, or us to them? So with our panel of speakers and experts today, we are going to try to find some answers to that questions, and I will also open the discussions for our audience. So whenever you want to talk, just raise your hand and you can speak up your mind or ask questions to our guests. But first, maybe some of you guys were not there the whole day, so I will let our speakers just introduce themselves, 20 seconds, name, function, so everyone knows who is everyone. You can start, Jonathan, but we just heard you.
You heard me, so game design professor.
Hello, so my name is Renaud. I'm head of engineering into a startup called MindMaze, which is active in stroke, neurological conditions, rehabilitation by doing VR, mostly providing medical devices based on VR.
Hello everyone, my name is Johan Jacquet. I'm a games author, mostly physical games, in mostly serious games. And today I'm here on behalf of Peace Brigades International, as well as Entrée de Jeu with double cap.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Olivier Reutenauer. I'm associate partner in Digital Kingdom. We are a studio, gaming and serious gaming studio in Vevey, Switzerland.
My name is Fabio Solari. I am a computer science professor at University of Genova. I work on exergame and serious gaming in virtual reality, essentially.
Thank you all for this introduction, and I'll have a first question for you guys. We'll talk about money today. And we are told for many years now that the serious game market is going to rise from 5 billion in 2020 to 32 billions in 2030. And you can see actually a lot of market studies on the web. They all point in the same direction with some fluctuation, but every year a 2-digit growth. So that's great news for all of us. But the first question I have to all you guys is, have you seen this money somewhere? Have you seen this money coming in Switzerland? Have you seen this money coming in Europe or maybe in the States? And this money, have you seen some private money in it? Not public money, not research money or academic money, but some private money. And I would love to hear the first thought of everyone on just this question. So who wants to start?
Maybe I can start with a question. Do you know where these numbers come from and what do they refer? Basically, are we talking about incomes, like direct incomes, or also maybe some, for example, if I take the case of our company, we're gonna probably, hopefully, generate some revenues, but which will be reimbursed in the frame of healthcare, insurance, and that kind of things. And probably the fact that we are doing rehabilitation through serious gaming will not be somehow taken much into account there, or maybe yes, I don't know. It's like, it's quite difficult to figure out what this number contains, like where does it come from?
It's really the market that really companies could invest in serious game. It's the investment on serious gaming from companies and from people asking to build some games.
So yeah, I think it could make sense to have these numbers by 2030. Yeah, if we take all the fields, defense, training, virtual training, healthcare, yeah, I guess that makes a significant number at the end.
You have felt this growth?
Yeah, pretty much. At least in the healthcare segment, yes. Definitely there is much more actors there, and the new way of curing, rehabilitating people is, yeah, it becomes a trend.
Olivier?
By our side, about industrials, those last years, it's a reality for us. Historically, Digital Kingdom was started in 2014. And historically, we've worked a lot with the cultural sector. And those last years, more and more industrials are coming to us to make serious game. It's more marketing and commercial games, but it's in the segment of serious game. So for us, it's a reality. As an example, we are currently working for the high-end watchmaking industry. I'm taking notes. And last month, we have also worked with the banknote and security device sector. And yes, it's becoming more and more common to work with industrials. So for us, by Digital Kingdom, it's a reality.
Jonathan, you said you're not a specialist in serious games, but have you got a point of view from across the sea?
A little bit. I have collaborators that have a studio for serious games, and I don't know if they've seen a growth, but I can say that they both get public sector funding or clients, and also private sector clients. So the market does exist. That's all I can say.
Fabio, you want to
I think
complete?
I see in Italy that some company are more interested in serious games since they see that they can decrease the cost for training or learning. If the company see how to decrease the cost in the other side of their jobs, I think they invest in serious game.
I will come back to where the games are made of, and you've talked about training and simulation. We will come back to this slide a little further on the discussion. The first thing I wanted to talk with you guys about is, should we work to get more industry in the serious games or more serious games in the industry? Should we work on the visibility? For example, can you name some big industry, some big groups that have used serious games internally or externally? You were talking about watchmakers, but do you know like famous brands that will really dig in serious games? Can you name one? I couldn't. Someone can. Can we bring you one mic? Yes. Perfect. Yes, U.S. Department of Defense,
Yes.
which is not a private sector.
Actually, concerning the private sectors, I've seen also a clear growth. Instead of having just public sectors, there is a clear growth in the private sectors. But I will not be allowed actually to give you some names, because I have some names, but all the companies, private companies we worked on serious games, wanted to keep it secret just for themselves. And I don't know if you realize here, there's not many companies. I know companies like at least, I would say 5 companies, quite big companies, Swiss companies, are dealing with that, and there's no representative, there's no presentation, it's just like for us. And keep it like that.
And it was my next question. You want to add something, Olivier?
We are finding some example in the luxury sector, but they mostly, if I'm right, trying to use existing games, video games, pure video games, don't know, like Fortnite and what else, to put their products into. I think so far it's the most la chose la plus visible actuellement. So the most visible thing
they do
today. We're also working by Digital Kingdom on projects who must remain secret at that time, but there is no idea to keep it secret on the long term. So when the project will be finished, it will remain public. About what Stefan says.
And when we don't see their games and we don't get visibility, maybe there's a question of how can we meet? And the next question I wanted to address with you is, there is no more big event around gaming in Switzerland since Ludicious closed, and even it was not very strong with serious games. And there's no fairs, there's no big events around gaming that could make those worlds meet, industry and gaming provider. Is that a trigger that you think might help getting visibility and getting some industrial money into serious games or some serious games into the industry. Jonathan, for example, how can you sell your business to the industry? No. We have two Jonathan.
Yeah. No, we have one Johan and one
Johan,
Jonathan.
excuse me.
Well, I'll speak from the point of view of someone who's more into physical games, and that's quite different. I would say that we're a few steps behind. We're still mostly, but it's also a matter of interest, of personal interest, of what our company is composed of. But we're still mostly within health, education as well, mostly the public sector with the sustainable development, etc. But we also tried industry in the last few years. It didn't really work. For some reasons, maybe we're not shiny enough with screens because we don't have screens. Maybe this is a technological problem. Maybe some industry needs some technology to be sexy. I don't know. And then the games industry, I would say, that industry in board games and physical games is about games industry, not really other industries getting interested into serious games or games at all so far. Maybe there are counter examples, but I would say we are a few steps behind in terms of physical games. So yeah, I mean, there are big events in board games, but I don't see a lot of industrial partners interested in that.
How is it in Italy, for example, Fabio? Are the serious games more known than maybe in other countries of Europe, or is it also difficult to have a serious game scene in your country?
Indeed, a serious game is not so common in Italy. No. There are some company that try to use it for internally, and as said Stefan, they keep sometimes this secret, since it's related to their internal processes, so they cannot advertise, and this indeed does not help to share the serious game.
So, talking about visibility, do you want to add something?
Yes.
Yes.
From my point of view, visibility for serious game for industry will not come directly from video games industry. For me, it's more the visibility comes because serious gaming and gaming generally comes because it's more and more common in our society. Video games becomes more and more common. Just an example, I've wrote in Digital Kingdom we are making serious game and indie games, and few years ago we didn't talk about independent video games we're making because video games still had bad press. Now it's quite different. It's even often through independent video games that we get in touch with customers because it becomes more and more common. And that's new from those 3-4 years. And I think for me the visibility comes because video games are more and more common. And for industrial, it's also they need to be confident in the products, to be confident in the people who are making serious gaming or video games. And I've wrote some inputs who are going in this way. I've wrote the Federal Council in Switzerland has conducted a study that shows the cultural and economic impacts in the sector in 2019. Organizational lobbying, there are support structures. Pro Helvetia, university entities are promoting video games. Game Lab at UNIL. And so all those things are making are putting the video games in front.
Forward on the scene.
Forward.
And even some canton, like Canton de Vaud, has
Yes,
just
Canton de Vaud
started.
yes.
I was very happy to be part of that support.
Yes.
One last question about visibility, because you're going to my next chapter, which is credibility.
Sorry.
But we'll go to that. Is the media, the role of the media? I don't know if you've seen, the Financial Times has released 2 serious games in the last 4 or 5 months. One on being a Uber driver and one on climate change. They're not very funny. They're not really games as we like to speak of them in this GSGS, because you get information, but it's not really fun to play, which is one of the mistakes of most serious games. But still, Financial Times is not really avant-garde journalism, and we've seen in Switzerland, the Blick has now gamified his newsletter by doing a quiz every week, and you have to find the answer on the last newsletter. That won't work. That won't work as well, I guess, but still they're trying to do something. And most of the medias are going maybe towards some gamification. But do they have the role of doing it or talking about it, and do they do their part of the job? Do you think they speak about games enough? We've seen that the game industry is now worth the music industry and the movie industry together. It's more of that. So are the media doing their job?
So definitely no. I mean, in Montreal and Quebec is definitely a place for video games. The legitimacy, the cultural legitimacy has been there for a long time. I mean, the students who want to study games, their parents don't go, whoa, this is stupid, but they go, oh, wow, you're gonna be rich. That's not true. But one thing the media did not follow. You have a few columns or reviews of video games, and someone in the industry told me, you know, every day on the radio or on the national television, I hear of, for example, this songwriter who published this new song. 10,000 people will listen to it or hear about it, but you have a studio there who made a game, 50 million players. No one knows about it. It's a local product, completely local team, not part of the news. It's a game, it's whatever. Once in a while, I was thinking of examples. Maybe the one that comes to mind, if I speak to someone and talk of serious games, maybe the only title they will tell me is Fold It, the game the crowdsourcing game where you would do a protein. It would be a puzzle. It would solve protein chemistry, and they had millions of players, and they actually like advanced 100 years in research thanks to that game. So that's when there's a success story. I suppose the media can do their role, but any baseline is non-existent.
Any other comments? Renaud first, and then Stéphane.
Yes, so in my case, I might be provocative, but I feel that serious gaming is really something which is like a business-to-business industry. And maybe that's why I'm not really sure we necessarily need to have some visibility. However, something which is really missing, you mentioned first, is I see in our case, we are a kind of game development company. We are doing some serious gaming, but we want to do much more than what we are currently doing, and getting connected to some real game studios that really worked on it, which is something that it's their core business, would be super nice. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think it's really like providing some first or some let's say business to business opportunities is really something which is missing, even only in Switzerland. Obviously, if there would have been one in the world, without talking about a game developer conference or that kind of thing, could be nice, but yeah, in Switzerland as well. As a kind of serious game, how do you consider like something like Dr. Kawashima? Remember this cognitive game on the Game Boy, I guess, or like the Nintendo DS where you can train your mental age, something? Yeah. Was kind of a success.
Stéphane?
What I'd like to add also is that there are still kind of confusion, at least two dimensions of confusion, in the media especially. In terms of vocabulary, gaming, serious game, gamification, are processes that actually are not the same. And it's not obvious at all. And everybody's, and even today I heard some people saying using some terms that maybe were not so very well appropriate, and we are supposed to be the experts. So imagine in media. So first of all. Second point is that we are still in a society where gaming was not such a nice and serious stuff. And the influence is strong, but also strongly changing. Strongly changing, especially with the electronic device, because like quite long ago, around, I would say, in the 80s, early 90s, people started when they were young, between 15 and 30, using a lot about video games, and these guys and girls, maybe, are now with the key of the money and in the business and stuff like that, because they have been working and gaming when they were young. They start changing the stuff. I'm pretty sure that the 2020s, before the 2030s, it will change completely. And there's a huge gap, and this is the right moment for gamification and serious game, and it's not the same, please.
You're also going forward on my discussion today, but that's cool. It means it has sense. I'm going forward to credibility, because it's maybe something we have to discuss with the industry. Should we work on credibility? Because serious gaming, when it's for training, when it's for selling something, what's the return on investment? What are the indicators that shows that your work is actually working? And I've seen many examples where the indicators were not offered in the offer of the studio, and when they were offered, they cost about 10% of the game, and when it's time to cut the deal, hey, let's take this 10% off, and the indicators are gone. So should we work on that? Should we work to make the people know that serious games work? Not actually in the academical sector, we have a lot of numbers, we've seen them today, but in the private sector. And I wanted your thoughts about that. Do you create indicators when you propose a game to an industry, for example, Renaud?
Yeah, so in our case, it's like mandatory. We are creating games that focus on rehabilitation. So you have to prove either that your games provide superior efficacy in terms of rehabilitation than, let's say, standard of care, or, which is usually the case, if you cannot prove this through clinical trials and that kind of thing, so that's pretty much an objective indicator. If you cannot claim any superior efficacy, usually what we claim is better therapist usage. For example, if you have a therapist, we are suffering a lack of therapists in Switzerland, but all over the world to rehab people. So the advantage of serious games in that case could be that you can discharge somehow a therapist, allow a therapist to train more people at the same time, or even offer the possibility to have untrained people which have a lower level of education than therapists to actually do the therapy or supervise, at least monitor a patient while he's doing this. So in that case, it's like better usage of therapies, practitioner time. And that's a good, I guess, indicator as well.
Johan or Olivier?
Hey, yeah. So I wanted to build on what Stefan was talking about in terms of terms, in terms of vocabulary, in terms of narrative, because credibility could be shown through numbers, through efficacy in an academic way, but I also have the feeling, even if I'm a quantitativist at first, I also see that we might lack credibility towards the industry, but we also lack credibility towards gamers or gaming specialists. For example, I had a great conversation with gaming specialists in the region. I will not name them, but one of them was really about games as a study object for the game. The other one was for the play, how to say that, really the gameplay was most interesting, and our position was games as tools, and this is seen by some gamers or game designers in board games, but I don't know how it is, but maybe as well in video games. If you use games as tools, it's...
You're not game anymore.
You're not gaming anymore. Or you actually, it's a fallacy, you're using, it's morally reprehensible, even. So maybe there is this narrative that we can show there is a diversity. You can play just for playing games, but also as tools, or even both. And both are sometimes difficult to make people comprehend. I don't know whether it's the same in video games industry or from specialists.
Olivier, what is your experience with companies? Do you get through with indicators, or do they just want the wow effect and then it's enough for them?
Most of the time with no measurement of performance. Because so far, industrials and other customers come to us for something else than pure measurement. They're coming for a new way, a new media, a new way of communication, a new tool, or a new way to contact or to keep in touch with another public
reach them.
target audience. Sorry. So far, the goal is more a new way, a new media.
But do you think indicators will help?
Because no needs.
For example, the social media guys, they just came in with, hey, let's go marketing, I'll do social media, here's the numbers, 1 million views, hey, great. And they get a lot of money.
At our level, there's so far no need for measurement like this. Yeah, sure, customers wants to have 100, 1,000 and more downloads, but sometimes they forget to invest the same amount in marketing that they have invested in the game. So yes, so far it's really a new media, a new way to communicate, a new way to target a specific audience, mostly teenagers and people above, just above. So I don't know if I answer your question, but so far no need for measurements. And you're totally right, it costs a lot to save data, make statistics, and there are no needs now.
There's one question or opinion?
Question, opinion. So,
both.
As the point was risen before, in terms of credibility, you have like company-to-company credibility about the product you sell, but also I think in serious games there's a huge question about the credibility towards the user. Giving an example, like you're in high school, and for us we had to learn like 200 French words within 2 weeks. And now let's say we make a serious game about this, like the user has to have a certain, it's a gamble for the user, for a student in university or general school. Do I play this game and hopefully I know the words afterwards and then I have my test, or do I sit down and learn them like an old-fashioned way? And like this example in different cases, I just asked myself, in your cases, how you experience this, did you have this problem with credibility towards the users, and if so, how did you tackle them?
Proof of efficiency, not just for the company, but for the ones that are targeted. Maybe Renaud or Jonathan in your sector, or, yeah, of course. Go Fabio.
Indeed, indicators for some company are very important. Since several projects that I had is from company that asked us to find indicator that the serious game approach is a valid approach. Of course in healthcare, but also for training. Since they asked, they have the internal research and development team that say to the boss, we can develop this serious game and then can do better this procedure, and then a worker can learn better. Okay, but you
does
need
it work?
Exactly. You need to measure it. So I think it's important, not for all the company, but for some company. In Genoa, you have some big company in the naval sector. They, to move the money, must need indicators.
And did you have the other questions from the users? Did the user ask you, it's a game, I won't do the same in the real life? Did you have this kind of challenge from the users?
Yeah, indeed. Since they are seen as a game, what Stefan said is correct. Indeed, now the people that were young use the game become in the right position. But when you use the game, they are only game for pleasure. Now we want to do game for something of different, and also for that people have to change the idea they have of the game. Since if you want to use it as a tool.
I will move forward to another trigger that we can use. Maybe it's work on courage. In 2019, I made the introduction speech was, where the hell is the serious game department in my company? And it was, of course, provocative. And the thing is, companies have a budget. And so it's like one cake. And when you want to do a serious game, you want some part of that budget. So where should we aim? Should we go to the marketing department and try to get a share? Should we go to the training department? Where is the money to build on serious games? And have we got something that we can really trigger to say, hey, we need a serious game, but to which department you will go? And I will go back to the slide that I had before with the application of games. And do you see any games going in these sectors, or even are we able to build a game to sell some more stuff, for example? Just not to train the ones that are selling, but can we do a game to sell some stuff, other than the game itself? So that's a question to you guys. In which sector do you think we can get the money from for serious games? Olivier.
By our side, it's clearly training and educational who have the poorest budget so far.
Yeah, and that's the problem.
As seen in 2013, yeah, it's right, advertising and marketing have clearly a most powerful amount of budget. And as said before, I think it's right to differentiate the field of the use of serious gaming. Clearly, measurements, budget, and depends on the field. Health and training and so on have other needs than advertising and marketing. I've said before, I've said more about advertising and marketing, or more, yes, and a way of to get another public audience. So I think after this conversation, it's really, there's different fields, different use of serious games, different budgets, different way to achieve it, and that's why making serious games it's really interesting. It's really different about the different subjects you can touch or work with or work for.
We'll have Bettina and then Jonathan.
Yes, so if I may add my perspective to it, so from where I'm situated in the cybersecurity and data protection field, I have my personal impression that in highly regulated markets, here is really potential for serious games because you need to prove each year these trainings. So once there's this obligation and this compliance procedures, then the companies think, okay, how can we fulfill this and not just let people click through? And then they try to come up with other ideas. And then we have now data protection regulation, we have more regulations about cybersecurity, and I see the regulations rising since some years, or a tendency to have more and more regulations, and here I see potential actually for serious games whenever you need to prove it because of legal obligations. This is at least my impression, where I find it, if I would work in the serious game field, I would see a market opportunity. And then there's this with these indicators, at least this we experience. If we can't show the indicator, I will not be, it's not so easy to sell it to the ones that have the budget. And asking about where the money should go to, I think in companies, I think it makes sense that there is no unit that says you are the game designers, because I think it makes sense to hand it out to a company that is focusing on game design. So I have the budget, I need to have these trainings, and then I go out to the market and go to companies like we see here, and then I buy that as a product. I don't see mandatorily a need to have this in-house.
Jonathan?
Yeah, just wanted to be provocative again and say that it's probably easier to sell a serious game than a regular game. Because you only have to convince a handful of people and you're actually delivering a service. Whereas a regular game, you have to talk to the world, and you're in competition with 1 million other games. There are hundreds of games being published every single day, and only a very small minority of them make any money at all. That's something that many people don't realize, but because we see the big successes, but these successes actually pay for the 100 failures next to it. And just to conclude with an anecdote, I was on the jury for the Canada Media Fund, which has a track that funds digital games and new media thing. And the proposals need to have some way to suggest how they will reimburse, because it's a loan that doesn't have to be completely reimbursed, but it's a loan. So how are you going to pay back? And I asked, did anybody ever pay back that loan? And the manager then said, one. Of all the games that were funded, one game, and it was a serious game. It was a game to teach fractions to children on a mobile phone. So that's something that's maybe off the radar, but regular games are also very, very difficult market.
Olivier?
Yeah, you're right. Just a little remark. So far, especially with industrial, where we are now making more video games than serious game, because about the difference you tell, and I think also that's different. It's new, and people, perhaps because they were gamers, people they have seen bad examples of serious gaming and so on, but here in Digital Kingdom, we have with kindly, yes, industrial give us a lot of creative liberty, and that's why we're going to more gaming, or whatever you say, okay, you term regular, okay, regular gaming than serious gaming, but yes, we're also trying to make a good balance, and if you heard me this morning. Yes, we try not to need to find a good balance, but try to use lever than purely gaming solutions and gameplay level design and so on to pass messages. You know.
One argument that serious game can make, and I don't know if you know this website, it's called click.click. If you haven't tried it, you should really, and you should put the sound on. It's really fun. It's a website that shows actually how data is collected without you knowing that data is collected.
Is this subject thinking about Facebook or so?
Okay, so that's the sound.
Subject. Still nothing.
And you can click twice and 3 times and everything, and then you can see all the data that is collected. My point is...
5, 6,
I will check that
7. Subject is having a hard time.
You should really try it. My point is the new market for serious games and for games data. Of course, there's a lot of legal problems, ethical problems, moral problems, but with games, you can really collect some amazing data. You said it, a lot of people said it today. And is there a field that it's not really built for right now, or people are afraid of getting into data, or gamified interactions can bring really a lot? Do you think that's one of the gold mine that serious games and games should go into? Data collection.
Maybe Facebook is the largest serious game.
Yeah, maybe Facebook is. We've seen some gamified, like Wish is a website that has gamified selling, because you cannot find the product, you have to try to find it. And in a way, it's like you said, make something easy difficult, and then it's a game. But what is your opinion on data collection from games? I know it's a hard subject, but still I want to hear you about it.
So in healthcare, I guess it's the key to prove some kind of efficacy, or to at least showcase some results. So it's kind of mandatory to acquire data. Then it might be also, but here I'm just guessing, the key to create new therapies, or to figure out or to invent new ways of treating. Like, I don't know if you know about this, probably it's really not about serious gaming, but there is an application where that is able to detect some cancer cells, bad cells, on a radiography, better than anyone can do, any human being can do right now, and it has been based actually through acquiring a huge amount of data being annotated by real human beings. And probably it's like a kind of boring process to do this. In the current machine learning way of doing things, we have a very strong need of data annotation. And this is something which is like, boring and might be really useful to gamify, I guess.
Someone else on data collection? Last point of the day, should we wait? Stefan said we have a generation gap for leaders. So maybe the best thing is just to wait. Money will come in, industry will come in, because industry CEOs are now gamers, or more and more gamers. So do you think we shall just wait, and maybe we'll get some more industry in gaming and serious gaming. Have you seen the change?
For us, yes, as I've said before, for us it's now, because even if CEOs are not gamers, they have children or grandchildren who plays, yes. They are seeing gaming through television, YouTube, and so on. So, as I said before, it's getting more and more common. So, for us, yes, we have now CEOs above 60 who wants to make games or those games. So, for us, it's a reality now. It will certainly growth through the time.
Stefan, you want to come again?
Yeah, I'm very talkative, sorry for that. I remember, like a couple of years ago, I've seen this TED talk, and it was a business angel, old business angel, doing this TED talk, and it was like, on my career, I had like around 500 opportunity to invest on companies and startups and stuff like that. And I was wondering why sometimes I was wrong and why sometimes I was right. So I made a huge survey, and I took a look at something like 5 parameters, like it was the amount of money that I was putting on the table, the quality of the team of the startup, the good communication, like quality in terms of technology, like high-tech guys, the quality in terms of communication and soft skills, and so on and so on. And his statistics said, at the end, it was the when. The main stuff is the when. It's not about the money. It's not about the good communication within the team. It's not about the good quality of the technical quality. Of course, if they are really bad in these matters, it will not work. But it was the when. And in our theme, domain, gamification and sales game, this is now. I'm pretty, like, I truly believe, like, if there's a GSGS 32, it will be, it was. It will not be, it will be.
Well, we hope to see GSGS 32. That's for sure. I wanted to also talk about standards and a lot of other things. Olivier, you had the last on this or on? Okay, so just a quick thing on standards, because we are running out of time, because it was maybe one of the questions, should we have standards? Should we have games like ISO 972? And that is also something that could raise awareness from the industry sector that there's something behind the games, or standards that prove that it works, or is it a free world because it's gaming? That's what you wanted to talk about, or not?
No, but
so you can try.
You can try
yours.
Another thing about standards, about the meaning of the level of game we provide, or those game we provide. You've said before, we are now compared to yes, AAA games and so on, and I think that the most of a challenge now, with less budget, little teams, and less time, we are now compared to, yes, AAA games. Gamers are become more and more aware of what is a good game and so on. And I think, yes, the standards go up, and we need to provide, yes, better games, serious games, and so on, about standards.
That's very good, because I wanted to ask each one of you for last round, and going to be yours on which trigger that we can use really to get the industry. Quality of the games is probably one. And what are for you guys the main trigger that the thing we could do about it to have more industrial serious games or more serious games in the industry, or make those worlds meet? Maybe each of you can give a comment on that, and it's going to be the final round.
I'll link that to standards. In my experience as a board game developer, our clients who are not end users have a lesser standard than in the usual game industry. Because we bring an idea, they're not specialists of games, so they're like, oh great, it's working. We do set the standards higher than our clients in terms of game design. Then on graphic design, it's another matter, etc. So maybe we could push ourselves or have colleagues or partners be more, set higher standards. And maybe have like ISO credits or something like this, something that makes us more credible. So that's maybe a way of looking at it. But then I missed my last thought. I'll come back later, maybe.
Arnaud, Jonathan?
So in my case about standards, I think it's good to have standards in terms of, I'm focusing here on serious gaming, like video gaming, but let's say on coding practice, good development practice, that kind of things, but maybe not on the game itself. In my opinion, it still needs to be kept as a creative process, and standards usually are a bit against creativity, in my opinion. And on the other question that you had, which was how do we somehow speed up the let's say the excitement of the industry for serious gaming? Yeah, it's a difficult question, but my take of this is that currently I feel that we are still lacking also good development studios working specifically on serious game, like Digital Kingdoms or these guys are pretty rare, and but we don't really. It's not easy to create a video games, and I think that we might lack also of education programs for this, and also because it's a creative process, it's something which is like multi-domains. You cannot just be a developer. Right now, somebody who's likely to become a serious game developer is a developer, he's a computer scientist, not necessarily like a game designer per se and so on. And I feel that we're lacking some kind of really strong training on this. So instead of providing standards, I would provide like education focused on some specific aspect of the video game development.
And Stefan, you should note that that's a good roundtable theme. I had one thing in my text about can we build up some developers and what do you need actually, because it's never been as simple to build a video game as right now. Anyone can download Unity and do a tutorial on YouTube, but since you're talking about a real education, so here's a good theme for another roundtable. Jonathan.
I'll just add one. I suspect that for serious games, it's the same thing as for indie games or games in general, is that finding a niche is great. Because if you're the only one doing that game for that either community or that problem or that context, then you're not compared to anyone. You're just there. And that's great. One of my most played games is a game about game studies, mostly concerned for professors teaching game studies. That's like I don't know, 500 people across the world, but I'm the only one there, so they play it.
And Fabio for last word, and we will
Indeed, the education is the most important part. It is not easy to bring together the competencies to do, for instance, a study course at university level, to teach good gaming and then a serious game or exergame. There is the need of a multidisciplinary competence. For instance, in Italy it's not easy, since in Italy you are splitted. The teachers are split based on their research. So computer science does not publish in the same place where publish biomedical engineering or digital humanities. And then when they try to do something together, it's not possible. And then this stops the possibility to have a good multidisciplinary teachers together. And this is a big problem, at least in Italy.
Thank you a lot, all of you, for this conversation. 3 minutes late. I think we've done the job. I don't know if anyone wants to add something in the audience, but I know that everyone is really warm. I am. So maybe we'll just call it the end, and we have another roundtable tomorrow about VR. And I'll be excited to talk about it with Fabio and others if you are there tomorrow. So thank you a lot, and you can give them a round of applause. And I'll leave the mic to you for the rest of the program.
Thank you very much, Julien. Thank you for animating this discussion. Thank you for all the participants. Thank you for the speakers. Thank you for you to attend this event. I know the day was long and very hot, but yeah, this is we have nothing to do with that. We have to support it. So the program now, as I said before, for people who will join us in the social event, so we will take 15-20 minutes to put all the materials and stuff, etc., in a secure place. So it will take 20 minutes. Then we will split into 2 groups, as I said. One group will go with Stefan and Fabio to the hotel, and the other group will follow me, and we will take a walk to the station. If you need to put something secure, we can put it, because the hola will be closed until tomorrow morning, so no problem. Yes, Stefan.
Concerning the people going to the hotel, I think we do not want or need to wait 20 minutes. We can go like in 5 minutes. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that would be much more convenient.
Yeah. So first, let me make a rapid counting. Okay. So here, for example, who will join us? Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We are supposed to be more than 30. Where are the others? Some other. Okay, so look, at last what we can do, I can take the information in front of the vote, no problem. I will make a vote who has general, abonnement général, demi-tarif, nothing. This is the only information I need. Okay, so we still, we maintain our program, 20 minutes to make some, arrangement, and then 2 groups, and the group who will go to the hotel, you can leave. Okay, it's okay, it's clear? Okay, and thank you again, and see you tomorrow. We start at 9:30 like today. Thank you.
The games you showed, they are playable online?